Hey friend, Min Hwang here of Life-Giving Motherhood. I am a Charlotte Mason homeschool mom of 4 children, plus my friend's 2 children. And I have been a devotee of Charlotte Mason for over a decade now. I have read her volumes over and over again. They have been life-changing for myself and for my family. It is definitely a resource that I have been sharing and recommending to all of my mama friends especially. Therefore, a resource I would like to see freely made available to every mother, to every family. I have been leading a Charlotte Mason Moms Book Club locally. Many of us are ESL for the past several years. And so for my book club, which is quite diverse, I have been reading them aloud and recording them for my Charlotte Mason moms. I realized that it would be wonderful to have these recordings made freely available to every family out there and to have it all located easily, conveniently in one place. And the idea of a podcast came to mind last year. So here it is. I am beginning with volume 4 ourselves because half of my moms have started reading that and they've been requesting for me to record it for them. As well, it is a book that was written for students, and my students are reading ourselves as of this year. So it's great for them to be able to hear it read aloud while following along in their books. After ourselves, I'll make my way to volume 5 and then volume 6 before I loop back around to volumes 1, 2, and 3. I hope this is helpful to you as well, dear friend. The first volume I thought we would start with is actually volume 4. Ourselves. It's written in 2 books. The first book is entitled Self-Knowledge. Here is where Charlotte Mason explores the kingdom of Mansoul, as she liked to call it. And this book was actually written not primarily for parents, although I believe every parent, every adult should read it as well. But she wrote it for students. And my students are at the age where they're going to be reading this. And since I was going to create an audio recording of it for them to use as they follow along in their own books, I thought I would make it available to you and your students as well. I hope it is helpful. Enjoy. Introductory, Chapter 1, The Country of Mansoul. Self-reverence, self-knowledge, self-control. These 3 alone lead life to sovereign power. Tennyson. The riches of Mansoul. Do ye not like fair lawns? Says King Alfred. And he answers himself, why should I not like fair lawns? They are the fairest part of God's creation. And of all the fair lands which God has made, there is no country more fair than the kingdom of Mansoul. The soil is almost everywhere very fertile, and where it is cultivated there are meadows, cornfields, and orchards with all manner of fruit. There are 2 wild nooks with rippling streams bordered by forget-me-nots and kingcups, places where the birds nest and sing. There are hazel copses where you may gather nuts, and there are forests with mighty trees. There are wildernesses too, marshy and unlovely, but these only wait for good and industrious hands to reclaim them and make them as fertile as the rest of the country. Deep under the surface lie beds of fuel to be had for the working, so that in that land there need never be a cold hearthstone. There are many other mines, too, where diligent workers find not only useful and necessary metals like copper and iron, but also silver and gold and very precious stones. When the workers are weary, they may rest, for there are trees for shade and shelter and pleasant playfields, and you may hear the laughter of the children and see them at their sports. Its rivers and cities. There are rivers broad and deep, good to bathe in and to swim in, and also good to bear the ships which carry those things produced by Mansoul to other countries far and near. Upon these rivers, too, sail the ships of many lands, bringing passengers and goods. There are busy cities in Mansoul, and these also are pleasant places, because though there are factories where men work and make all manner of things for home use or to be sent abroad, there are also fair and beautiful buildings, palaces of delight, where are gathered the treasures of Mansoul, galleries of precious and beautiful pictures painted by the great artists of all countries, statues of the heroes that are had in reverence there, halls with organs of noble tone, which can roar like the thunder and babble like a child, and all manner of musical instruments. To these halls, great musicians come and play wonderful things that they have made. The people of Mansoul listen, and great thoughts swell in them, and everyone feels as if he could get up and go and be a hero. Its books and playgrounds. There are libraries too, such libraries containing every book of delight that ever was written. When anybody sits down to read, the author who made the books comes and leans over his shoulder and talks to him. I forgot to say that in the picture galleries, the old painters do the same thing. They come and say what they meant by it all. There is no city in Mansoul so built up, but there is plenty of space for parks and cricket grounds, playing fields and places where people meet and are merry, dance, and sing. Nobody need be poor in Mansoul, and if anybody is poor, neglected, and stunted, it is for a reason which we shall consider by and by. Its churches and its delectable mountains. The best treasures of the country are kept in the fairest of its buildings, in its churches, which are always open so that people may go in and out many times a day to talk with God, and he comes and speaks with them. But indeed, he walks about everywhere in the land, in the workshops, in the picture galleries, and in the fields. People consult him about everything, little things and great, and he advises about them all. Much remains to be said about Mansoul, but I think I have left out the chief thing, the delectable mountains, where people go that they may breathe mountain air, gather the lovely mountain flowers, and brace their limbs and lungs with the toilsome delight of climbing. From the top they get a view that makes them solemnly glad. They see a good deal of Mansoul, and they see the borders of the land that is very far off. They see a good deal of Mansoul, but they cannot see it all. For a curious thing is that no map has been made of the country, because a great deal of it is yet unexplored, and men have not discovered its boundaries. This is exciting and delightful to the people because, though here and there Mansoul is touched by another such country as itself, there are everywhere reaches which no man has seen, regions of country which may be rich and beautiful. Chapter 2. The Perils of Mansoul. The government to blame. You are thinking, I dare say, what a rich and beautiful country Mansoul must be. But, like most other lands, it is subject to many perils. Unlike most other lands, however, Mansoul has means of escape from the perils that threaten it from time to time. In other countries, we hear the government blamed if poor people have not bread and if rich people are annoyed by the crowing of a cock. This is usually great nonsense, but it is not nonsense to blame the government of Mansoul for the evils that occur in that country, for it has large power to prevent those evils. How the country is governed you shall hear later. Meantime, learn something of the perils which may overtake poor Mansoul and all that are in it. Peril of sloth. Perhaps the most common evil is a sort of epidemic of sloth that spreads over the whole country. The scavengers sit with heavy eyes and folded arms and let refuse and filth accumulate in the streets. The farmers and the laborers say, "What's the good?" and fail to go out with the plow or to sow the seed. Fruit drops from the trees and rots because no one cares to pick it up. The ships lie idle in the harbors because nobody wants anything from abroad. The librarians let their books be buried in dust and devoured by insects and neglect their duty of gathering more. The pictures grow dim and tattered for want of care, and nobody in the whole country thinks it worth while to do anything at all. Sometimes the people still care to play, but play without work becomes dull after a time and soon comes to a stop. And so the people, whatever be their business in Mansoul, sit or lounge about with dull eyes, folded arms, and hanging heads. Peril of fire. Another risk that Mansoul runs is that of great conflagrations. Sometimes an incendiary will land at one of its ports from some foreign country, perhaps with the express purpose of setting fire to what is best in Mansoul. But perhaps a man sets fire to things by accident because he does not know how inflammable they are. The fire once begun, the wind carries the flames over many miles of country. Noble buildings, precious works of art, farmsteads with stacks of corn, everything is consumed, and ruin follows the track of the fire. Sometimes these fires arise in Mansoul itself. I have told you that the country has great beds of underlying fuel. Here and there, inflammable gases break out on the surface, and a spark, dropped in the region of these gases, is sufficient to cause a wild conflagration. But Mansoul ought to be as careful as people in Switzerland are when a hot wind called the Föhn blows, and orders are issued that everyone is to put out his fires and lights. Perils of plague, flood, and famine. Sometimes there is a visitation of the plague, because dwelling houses, streets, and outbuildings are not kept clean and wholesome, and the drains are allowed to get into disorder. Sometimes the springs swell in the hills, the rivers overflow, and there is a flood. But this is not always a misfortune in the end, because much that is rotten and unclean is swept away, and lands washed by a flood are very fertile afterwards. Again, it may happen that the crops fail, though the land has been diligently tilled and good seed sown. But neighboring states are kind and help Mansoul in these distressful times, and the crops of the following year are generally abundant. Peril of discord. Another cause of occasional misery in Mansoul is that a spirit of discord breaks out now and then among the members of the community, and becomes sometimes so violent as to lead to a devastating civil war. The servants and workmen will not obey the masters, and the masters will not consider their servants, and are at feud among themselves. One member of the ministry chooses to attend to the work of some other member. All useful employments are neglected, and the people are a prey to envy and discontent. I might tell you of some other causes of misery in Mansoul, but shall mention only one more, which is by far the worst that ever overtakes the state. Peril of darkness. Lovely and smiling as a country is when it is well ordered, mists at times emanate from it, chilling, soaking mists, dense and black. Not a ray of the sun can penetrate these mists, no light, no warmth. There is no seeing of one's way, so that the people say, "There is no sun," and some of the more foolish add, "There never was a sun in heaven, and there never will be." When they cannot see the sun, of course, they cannot see each other and blunder against one another in the darkness. You will say that many lands, especially low lands, are subject to blinding mists, but nowhere can they be so thick and heavy, and nowhere do they lie so long as in the kingdom of Mansoul. One quite exceptional thing about these mists is that they also are largely under control of the government, especially of the Prime Minister. How this can be so, I cannot fully explain here, but you will understand later. Because all these things can happen to Mansoul, we must not run away with the idea that it is an unhappy country. On the contrary, it is radiant and lovely, busy and gay, full of many interests and of joyous life, so long as the government attends to its duties. Chapter 3. The Government of Mansoul. Each of us a kingdom of Mansoul. I must give up attempting to talk about Mansoul in parables. I dare say you have already found it difficult to make everything fit. But never mind. What you do not understand now, you may understand someday, or you may see a meaning better and truer than that which is intended. Every human being, child or man, is a kingdom of Mansoul, and to be born a human being is like coming into a very great estate. So much in the way of goodness, greatness, heroism, wisdom, and knowledge is possible to us all. Therefore, I have said that no one has discovered the boundaries of the kingdom of Mansoul, for nobody knows how much is possible to any one person. Many persons go through life without recognizing this. They have no notion of how much they can do and feel, know and be, and so their lives turn out poor, narrow, and disappointing. It is indeed true that Mansoul is like a great and rich country, with a more or less powerful and harmonious government, because there is a part of ourselves whose business it is to manage and make the best of the rest of ourselves, and that part of ourselves we shall call the government. Officers of State. There are many officers of state, each with his distinct work to do in the economy of this kingdom of Mansoul. And if each does his own work, and if all work together, Mansoul is happy and prosperous. I will give a list of a few of the great officers of state, and later we shall consider what each has to do. To begin with the lowest, there are the esquires of the body, commonly called the appetites. Then comes the lords of the exchequer, known as the desires, the lords of the treasury, that is, the affections, then the foreign secretary, that is, the intellect with his colleagues, my lord chief explorer, imagination, and my lord president of the arts, the aesthetic sense. The Lord Attorney General, that is the reason, the Lords of the House of Heart, the Lord Chief Justice, that is the conscience, the Prime Minister, that is the will. There are various other officers of state whom we cannot name now, but these are the principal. Beyond and above all these is the king, for you remember that Mansoul is a kingdom. the 4 chambers. These various ministers we may conceive as sitting each in the house with the ordering of whose affairs he is concerned. These houses are the house of body, the house of mind, the house of heart, and the house of soul. You must not understand that all these are different parts of a person, but that they are different powers which every person has, and which every person must exercise in order to make the most of that great inheritance which he is born to as a human being.